What you guys are probably more excited for, other than the recap of this Clippers game, is of course the news that De'Aaron Fox's number one preferred trade destination. Well, first of all, the Spurs are, or excuse me, the Kings are exploring trading De'Aaron Fox. They're really prioritizing it as their contract extension discussions have kind of stalled with De'Aaron kind of not well, before the season, he said that I wanted to see, where where the organization was going to go. Was their ceiling going to be a championship ceiling? Is it going to
Right.
be a championship level contender? And then now that we're here at this point, as those discussions have gone on, behind closed doors and not in the public, it's became clear that he just wants a trade. And according to all reporting from Shams Charania, as well as guys like Chris Haynes, all of the big NBA reporters, they have been basically reporting that anywhere else is a rental. That is what Shams Charania said
Mm.
today specifically, and that De'Aaron Fox, who is a Texas native, essentially has a plan that he wants to come to San Antonio, whether that's through free agency or via a trade, and that he'll even potentially force his way there. Um, so that's where we're at. That happened yesterday while I was at work. And it's a weird place to be in for the Spurs, but it's also, something that makes me super excited. But it was definitely something where when I saw that, it made me happy. But just with the mind frame that we've been in over the past couple of seasons, it's kind of hard to just like get back into that. Okay, wow, like we could get an all-star coming to our team, and then we have to think about the team in that mindset. Like that's kind of what I've been trying to juggle in my brain so far. Obviously, nothing has happened, and we will say as a caveat, nothing is for certain. But the one thing that does seem certain is that De'Aaron Fox wants to come to the Spurs, however that may be. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
It's exciting for sure. It's unusual to have the San Antonio Spurs in these kind of discussions as a preferred destination for an all-star level player such as this. This is what we've been talking about since we drafted Victor, bringing in an
Mm-hmm.
all-star caliber point guard to play alongside him. And when would that be? Who would it be? I like the fit with De'Aaron Fox. My concern is if he's wanting to come to San Antonio anyway, does it behoove us to just not trade for him, wait another year, develop, draft, use our draft capital, um, and then in 2026 free agency, just bring him in then and make the trades necessary to make the money work? Like if that is his end goal, then we should try that. And not to be the history buff and the NBA nerd
Yeah.
here, but the same thing kind of happened with the Denver Nuggets back in the day with Carmelo Anthony, who wanted to go to New York and he was
Mm-hmm.
demanding a trade. So New York had to give up a lot of their young core and draft capital to get him. When he ultimately could have just come to New York the following offseason as a free agent. And obviously, we all know what happened in New York Knicks after that. So that's my only concern, Jude. Um, but if we're able to give up minimal talent, and I'm
Yeah.
saying I don't want to trade Jeremy Sohan, I don't want to trade Stephon Castle, and I don't want to trade Devin Vassell. If we don't have to lose those three guys, then I think we do have to consider the trade.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to consider it regardless. And key word is consider. Just because of the fact that, like you have an all-star level point guard that's like, hey, I
True.
want to come play for you specifically. I don't want to play for
Good point.
anybody else. I want to play for the Spurs. So, I mean, that also is another thing that it almost like I feel like it isn't even real that we're having this discussion.
Mm,
Like because it's just even like when we grew up in the Spurs dynasty, LaMarcus Aldridge was the biggest name free agent, or him and Steven Jackson. Maybe you could throw in Richard Jefferson. I mean, those are the three biggest free
yeah.
agent names that came to San Antonio. And obviously, this would potentially, be through a trade as well. But to your point, like you said, which I think is, you tweeted about this, and I think this is a really good point in this discussion. If De'Aaron Fox wants to force his way here, and Shams Charania is saying from his reporting that anywhere else is a rental, like he is zeroed in on coming here, and their reporting is accurate, then why would you, trade these assets? Or at the least, you got to use all the leverage you have because
Hmm.
these other teams, if they know it's just a rental, they're not going to want to trade for him as much. So in the negotiations, you got to be like, look, we know we're your only suitor. we're not, these guys are off the table for us. So you can either get some of our picks, you can either get some assets from us, or you can get nothing from us, and we're going to get them regardless. You know what I mean? So that's just something you got to keep in mind in the discussions.
I don't remember which year it was, but we do own a Sacramento Kings draft pick, first round pick. So that
Go
is
ahead.
some ammunition we could definitely hang over their heads if we want to limit just depending on where Sacramento is. It sounds like they want to win now, so they're going to want guys that can help them,
Hmm.
even if they do lose De'Aaron. I just don't think the Spurs have anything to offer though that puts them any higher than they are right now. Jude,
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Well, on that aspect, the only thing that we would have that would like elevate the Kings, especially if they're losing De'Aaron, would be Victor, and obviously that's not happening. Um, but I think the Kings are going to be approaching this from a place where they're kind of like they understand that they're going to have to take a step back with.
to move forward.
Yeah, in order to get rid, like, if they're getting rid of De'Aaron Fox, like, they're in a different situation. As much as they still have, the other core around them, and that kinda gets to the root of the question, which is probably who the trade is going to be surrounded by. But before we get to that, this is what I laughed at earlier. Mark says we need to trade the Coyote for Fox straight up. Oh, that'd be a good. Look, it would be sad, but I feel like that would be the best deal. Um, no, but
That's pretty good. Social
oh,
media team would have fun with that
that
one.
that 100% in here. So actually, I have. Let me pull these up, or let me get these over here, Ethan. But I have um two screenshots from ESPN front office reporter Bobby Marks that he has for the Spurs whenever it comes to trade scenarios. The other one we probably don't need to talk about that much. I love how Winky's just
He's just
he
chilling,
wants
dude.
he wants to be in the shot, man, like for sure. Okay. So he actually he is in Winky. No. Bobby
Winky
Marks
reports.
Marks had
Mox.
Mox. That was the New York accent. He had two different trade ideas here, and one wasn't involving the Kings, so I won't pull that up. It was actually involving Brandon Ingram, and the Spurs trading for
Oh
him,
wow.
which I thought was interesting. But this is the trade that he has for the Spurs and the Sacramento Kings potentially, and he has it involving Stephon Castle, Keldon Johnson, and then 3 first-round picks that are ours. We have that are not ours that we have the rights to for De'Aaron Fox. So essentially, that would be 3 different picks that aren't ours, that are for Atlanta and Chicago, as you can see, and then Stephon and Keldon Johnson. Um, the reason I bring that up, I'm not saying like that's the trade that I would want to do. I'm just saying I do think that any trade discussion with De'Aaron Fox probably surrounds Stephon Castle.
I'm not doing it with Stefan if I'm the Spurs. And
Really?
yeah, there's no, I'm not. I
Even
think
if you got to keep everybody else?
correct.
Okay.
Here's the max offer I would go with, Jude. Do you want to hear my version?
Mhm.
I would trade Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, Malachi Branham, and those 3 picks that you just had on the screen. And we might even swap one of them out just to give them back their like 2030 Sacramento pick. Because at that point, they'll probably be tanking again.
Mhm.
That's the most I do. And that's even being generous. I would rather go down to 2 first-round picks, but I have a feeling that without including Stefan, it's going to cost 3. And they might even push for 4. I'm not doing 4, and I'm definitely not including Steph.
Okay, so Steph is on your off limits list regardless.
Hmm.
I don't wanna trade Stephon. Don't get me wrong. But if it comes down to that being the deal breaker with De'Aaron Fox, I think I'd be willing to do it. And I know that sucks to say, um, just because he's so young and he has so much potential. But because they both play the same position, and
Hmm.
I know what De'Aaron Fox is going to be, I would be willing to do it at this point. But that's also where we're keeping that's on like the stipulation that we're keeping everybody else. But again, I don't. I'm not mad like at somebody who's saying like I would rather just hold on to Stephon because I see the potential 100%. Like I would be willing to do something else. Like I'd be open to other possibilities as well. Like I don't know. I mean, I feel like it probably has to involve a guard, and I'm trying to think somebody else who's like, again that they would want to take. And the first guard that comes to mind, other than a Stephon Castle, would probably be like a Devin Vassell, right?
Correct, and I'm not giving up Devin Vassell either,
Yeah, I see.
personally.
And I didn't. And that was for me. It was like I kind of wanted like if we were to have to give up somebody, out of our young core when it comes to this discussion, as much as I really do not want to give up Stephon, if it came down to this fit and we're forced to have this discussion. Like I said, I
Mhm.
I don't want to trade Stephon. Let me say that. But in this scenario, I think that like a Jeremy Sohan and a Devin Vassell would be more important surrounding De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama than a Stephon. And that's not Stephon when he's 28. That's Stephon when he's 20. Because I
Mm.
think that, of course, Devin could play off the ball a little bit more as a shooter. And then Jeremy just, he plays a completely different position. So that he kind of fills another need there. Um, but I'm not really mad at you saying all of those guys are off limits. And again, here's the thing: as much as we're talking about all these trade discussions, this goes back to really the question that this all stemmed from, Ethan, and that's should we even do the trade because he wants to come here?
That's exactly my point. Like, we have all the leverage. If that is true, if he really wants to
Right.
come to San Antonio, then we have all the leverage, and we can tell them we are not giving up these 3 players, Devin, Jeremy, and Stephon. Here's our offer. If you need more,
Hmm.
sure, counter, but we're not giving up these 3 guys. And if we aren't able to get a deal done, then I think we walk
Wait
away
it out.
and we
Yeah.
wait it out because we weren't expecting this to come along. This would be a luxury, and I would rejoice and love it.
Right.
But I'm not willing to give up my future completely because I really do believe in Stefan Castle. I think he's taken
Hmm.
leaps this season
And he's
already.
a malleable player. To kind of add a counterpoint to what I was
Hmm.
saying, is he would be a guard. He's somebody who's proven that he can play, in other positions for sure.
Just to entertain the thought, if I had to give up either Devin or Stefan, I understand your point. I guess we'll go Stefan because Devin just fits better. Um, and
See,
De'Aaron immediately just replaces him positionally. But I would literally give up nothing else, and I'd make them take Zach Collins' contract.
right, right, right.
That's a stipulation. You're not
And,
getting any picks, and you're getting Zach Collins to make
and
the money
see,
work.
when I think about this, it's such a tough conversation because I'm seeing y'all say, like I would take Steph over Devin, and honestly, if I'm talking just straight up like ceiling, you know what I mean? I think as of right now, I would say that I think there's definitely still a chance. Well, he's a rookie, and Devin's 24, but I think there's definitely an argument to be made that Stephon Castle could have a higher ceiling than Devin
Mhm.
Vassell for sure. So like I get where y'all are coming from.
It's true.
Again, it's kind of the fit thing for me that I'm thinking about. But really, I think that the main thing I'm realizing as we have this discussion, Ethan, is I don't really want to trade any of these guys. But the other thing is we know that eventually down the line, a move like this is going to happen. And and some of our guys that do fit the Spurs mold and have kind of been homegrown. Eventually, some of those guys were going to have to depart. So that's the thing for me on this one, where like
Mm,
I because he wants to come here, I think I'd be willing to part with some of those guys that I don't necessarily want to trade, first option, if
mm,
that makes sense. Um, because of the opportunity, And I know that we're going to have a lot of players that want to come play with us. We were just talking about last episode the number one player from 2026 who's committed to BYU who wants to come play with us. So there is
mm,
that side of things as well, as like maybe this isn't the last opportunity to get a star player. Um, but I do really think that I want to bring in De'Aaron Fox, and maybe it's just because a star all-star player wants us. Maybe it's just because we haven't really had that, and that's why I want to bring him in. Or maybe it's just because we've seen, Wemby's ascension in year 2, and now I want to accelerate that timeline because we know how good he is, and we have somebody who wants to come in and play with him.
Right.
Um, but also, again, Ethan, not to just talk in circles. With all of that being said, we have options here because of the circumstances of the situation. We do not have to make a trade. Um,
Right.
but I do want to go out and get him, and so I wonder. I just kind of wonder how the Spurs are gonna play this out, because the thing is, as much as there's all this reporting that he's anywhere else is just a rental, a lot can happen in a year and a half too. So
Right.
like, do they want to risk that as well?
I tell you what, the Spurs trying to make a midseason trade has to look like a Canadian trying to be rude to somebody. It's just
Yeah,
completely
no, yeah.
foreign to them. They're like, I don't even know what we
Uh-huh.
do. Y'all have their number in Sacramento? I don't know. I lost it. I feel like is what's going through their mind. Just to say this, if it is Devin Vassell that has to be included in this, I totally get it. It does make the salary work.
Yeah.
And if I'm the Spurs, I'd try and limit it like Devin and a first, and that's it. And just see if that works. You know what I mean? My only
Mhm.
request, and not that they're listening to me in any capacity, is that we play hardball with this one because we do have the leverage. And I think ultimately this is a guy that we could probably get sooner rather than later.
Yeah. When it comes to Stefan, uh, Devin, and Jeremy, I think this is the last thing I'll say on this. I'm only willing to give up one of those three and no more,
Oh,
because I feel like
100%.
because I but I feel like one of those three is probably going to have to be involved in this trade. And honestly, it's probably going to be one of the guards, just because they're losing De'Aaron.
I'm gonna change
Okay.
my tone on this one. If one of those three guys has to be included, I think I would personally include Devin.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what a lot of people are saying in the comments, man. And as much as I said Stefan earlier, the more that we've talked in this conversation, the more that I'm re-asking myself this question. But
De'Aaron,
I think I'm gonna, for the sake of this, you know what? I'm gonna stick with it, because I do believe in Devin, and I do think that the shooting is a good thing fit wise.
it is. And my only caveat would be Julian, and even though he's horrible to watch sometimes, Malachi can space the floor for us. And so can Harrison Barnes. Keldon Johnson can elevate his
Okay,
role a little
that's
bit.
true. That's a good point.
Stefan assumes maybe he continues to start because De'Aaron can shoot,
Riley,
right?
Riley, Riley
Right. Riley
Minix.
Minix is coming.
Riley Minix in the tank, man. He's loading.
And there's always a really good shooter. It seems like a couple of these picks, Jude, that we have from other teams might fall to like the late lottery or just like low teens, right?
Mhm.
There's always a really good shooter that's 23 or 24
That's
in
what
the
I was
draft,
gonna say.
right there for the taking.
There's a lot of, I hate to put it this way, but there's a lot of Corey Kisperts.
That's exactly who I was thinking of.
Yeah, right.
If we make this trade, let's go get Justin Champagnie
Oh
too.
man.
We've been talking about that for a while. I really
Uh,
want to go get Justin Champagnie.
oh my goodness, man. Yeah. I think we kind of fleshed out this trade pretty good. Are there any other final thoughts on this De'Aaron Fox situation as of right now?
I think it's T minus 7 days, right? Until we have to know for
Mhm.
sure something's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll do that. Well, we're going to have an episode next week. So we will kind of give our final, more like just final predictions on the deadline, and, kind of let this simmer for a little bit. Maybe we get some news in between then. And if that happens, obviously we'll react to that. But if next week, or early next week, kind of like Monday, Tuesday, if there's nothing else, if there hasn't been a trade, we'll come back. We'll give our thoughts on what we would prefer, like final thoughts, a little bit more fleshed out instead of just talking it through here, kind of as we did. What's off limits, what isn't off limits, and as well as maybe some other moves too. Because as much we're talking about this De'Aaron move as we should, because that's the biggest talking point. But the other thing that I think you and I are also hammering for, or clamoring for, I guess both, is a backup big. So that is the other thing that we will talk about in that episode as well.